A warm breeze floated through the suburban streets just outside Atlanta as Sergeant Meyer Ellis, dressed in full Army fatigues, made her way toward her car parked near a small convenience store. She had just finished a brief stop to grab a drink before heading to her next training session. Her uniform was crisp, her name tag clearly visible, and her posture spoke of the discipline she carried after nearly a decade of military service. It was an ordinary day, or at least it should have been. As she reached for her keys, the low hum of a police cruiser grew louder behind her. She turned slightly to see two officers stepping out of the vehicle with urgency in their stride. They didn't say much at first, just a rapid-fire request for identification and a vague claim of a suspicious person matching her description. Confused but composed, Meyer explained that she was active duty, showed her military ID along with her driver's license, and asked why she was being approached so aggressively. The officers barely glanced at her credentials before one of them stepped forward, instructing her to put your hands where we can see them. She hesitated just long enough to ask what she was being detained for, and that's when things turned. Within seconds, both officers moved in. One grabbed her wrist, the other pulled her arm behind her back, twisting it upward as if she were resisting. "I'm not resisting," Meyer repeated steadily, trying to keep her voice from shaking. Her ID fell to the ground as her arms were secured tightly in handcuffs. She was pressed against the hood of the cruiser, her military cap falling off and tumbling to the pavement. Her uniform, the one that symbolized service and sacrifice, was now wrinkled and smeared against metal and dust. Pedestrians started to gather, watching the scene unfold. A man on a bicycle slowed down and pulled out his phone, starting to record. Maya's voice could be heard in the video, calm but strained, as she again asked what she had done wrong. One officer muttered something about a robbery suspect, the other said she fit the profile. No details were given, no apology offered. The man filming asked if the officers realized they had just arrested a U.S. Army sergeant in uniform. They ignored him. Minutes dragged. Maya stood handcuffed beside the cruiser, her dignity bruised far worse than her wrists. She asked if she could make a phone call. One officer told her to wait. Another officer who had just arrived on the scene looked uncertain, clearly uncomfortable, but said nothing. Eventually, they allowed her to use her phone as long as it was on speaker. She called her commanding officer. Her voice wavered only slightly as she gave her name, location, and a brief explanation of what had happened. The reaction on the other end of the call was immediate and intense. The officers seemed unsure now. One of them started pacing, glancing back at Maya, now aware that something bigger than a routine stop might be unfolding. The camera was still rolling. The man with the phone continued to narrate what was happening, pointing out how Maya had remained calm, how she had done everything right, and how none of that seemed to matter. People began gathering in small clusters around the perimeter, murmuring among themselves, whispering Maya's name and wondering how it had come to this. Back at the precinct, radios buzzed. A call had come in from higher up. Eyes were now on the small suburban department. A mistake had been made, and it wasn't going to stay hidden. The moment the handcuffs clicked around Maya's wrists, something shifted. She stood rigid, shoulders squared despite the tight grip of cold metal digging into her skin. Her calm demeanor only seemed to agitate the officers more. One of them, a stocky man with mirrored sunglasses and a clenched jaw, barked orders at her, while the other kept a hand near his holstered weapon. They ignored her repeated requests for clarification, for answers, for a reason. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't struggling. She simply stood in the street, a black woman in full Army uniform, being treated like a threat. Her name tag read Ellis, stitched in sharp black letters. Her unit patch, deployment ribbon, and U.S. flag were all plainly visible on her sleeves. Still, neither officer acknowledged them. The man filming kept his camera trained on her, capturing everything. The stoic expression on her face, the flippant attitude of the officers, the unmistakable tension in the air. You can see her ID right there. the man said loudly, zooming in on the military identification lying on the ground just inches from her boot. "She's military. Are y'all serious?" The officers didn't respond. They acted as if they couldn't hear anything except the narrative they had already formed. They forced Meyer into the back of the cruiser, her knees brushing the doorframe awkwardly as she ducked inside, her utility belt slightly catching on the edge of the seat. The cuffs were still on. Her hands, trained for emergency triage and weapon handling, were now numb from pressure and lack of circulation. Inside the car, she sat upright, focusing on her breathing. She had gone through rigorous combat training, completed overseas missions, led squads under extreme stress. But this encounter with law enforcement in her own country, in her own neighborhood, felt entirely different. The humiliation of being treated like a suspect with no just cause, while dressed in the very uniform that was supposed to represent honor and duty, hit harder than anything she had trained for. On the street, the bystander's video continued rolling. The tension was growing louder than the sirens that had brought more patrol cars to the scene. Neighbors were coming out of their homes. A woman across the street held her hands to her mouth, watching in disbelief. "I've seen her before," she said to a man beside her. "She lives down the block. She's a soldier." But none of that seemed to register with the officers on the ground. Meyer asked again if someone could retrieve her ID from the pavement. They refused. Instead, one of them radioed for backup, stating that they had a non-compliant individual in custody. The wording made Maya flinch. That word, non-compliant, had been used far too often to justify far worse outcomes. But she refused to show fear. Not here, not now. She shifted her wrists slightly, trying to ease the pressure from the cuffs. One officer noticed. "Stop moving," he said sharply, stepping back toward the cruiser. Maya turned her head, speaking clearly through the window's small opening. "I'm a staff sergeant in the United States Army. You're making a mistake." The officer didn't answer. He closed the door instead. Inside the precinct, the situation would soon become impossible to ignore. But at that moment, on the side of a quiet neighborhood street, Maya sat in the back of a patrol car, her voice silenced and her authority dismissed. The fabric of her uniform, the same one worn in battle in disaster zones in defense of the very freedoms the officers claimed to protect, offered her no protection here. Her skin, more than her service, was what they saw first. The bystander's video, shaky but clear, began making its rounds almost instantly. It captured everything from the moment Maya was approached to the point she was placed in the back of the cruiser. The man filming, identified later as a local college student named Andre, narrated the entire encounter in disbelief, emphasizing how calm Maya remained and how unnecessary the officer's aggression seemed. He uploaded the footage to his social media with the caption, "Army sergeant in uniform harassed and cuffed in my neighborhood. No reason, no explanation. This is America." Within an hour, the video had spread across platforms: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. The views climbed into the hundreds of thousands, then millions. People reacted with outrage, tagging military accounts, news outlets, civil rights organizations, and local government officials. Hashtags like #justice for SGD Ellis, #uniform not a shield, and #black in uniform began trending. Comments flooded in from veterans, active duty soldiers, and civilians alike. Many said they had never seen anything like it. A decorated soldier in full uniform, handcuffed on a sidewalk as if her service meant nothing. By evening, national news outlets had picked up the story. The video aired on several networks during their primetime segments, often side by side with freeze frames of Maya's military insignia and the officers' dismissive expressions. A former Army captain appeared on one news panel, visibly shaken, saying, "It's one thing to talk about systemic issues. It's another to see them play out in real time, against one of our own." Social media lit up with support. People posted their own photos in uniform, holding signs with Maya's name. Prominent voices, including military generals, senators, and celebrities, spoke out online, demanding an investigation. Others highlighted a deeper issue, how even military service doesn't insulate Black Americans from racial profiling and mistreatment. If this can happen to her, one user wrote, what hope is there for anyone else? Local officials found themselves under a spotlight they weren't prepared for. Reporters swarmed the police department for comment, but answers were scarce. Meanwhile, Maya's commanding officer issued a carefully worded statement confirming her identity and her active duty status. Staff Sergeant Meyer Ellis is a respected member of our unit with an exemplary record. We are aware of the incident and are actively reviewing the facts. Despite the viral attention, the video never showed any aggression from Maya. It showed professionalism, composure, uniformed authority. It showed her standing straight as she was detained, explaining who she was without raising her voice, and asking fair, direct questions. That, too, became part of the outrage, that even someone who did everything right was still treated like a suspect, still placed in cuffs, still silenced. The impact of the video was undeniable. It ignited a digital firestorm that no one could contain, not the department, not the officers, not the city leaders who now faced growing pressure to act. It was just one video, less than 5 minutes long, but it had become a mirror, a moment captured in passing that revealed something much deeper and more systemic. Seated in the back of the cruiser, wrists still locked behind her, Maya knew exactly who to call. Her phone had been handed to her with hesitation, one officer insisting it be on speaker. Her fingers, stiff from the pressure of the cuffs, trembled slightly as she tapped the contact. The line rang only once. Ellis, came the voice on the other end, calm, authoritative, instantly alert. Sir, I'm currently detained by local police. I was stopped without cause outside a convenience store. I'm in uniform, ID presented, no charges given, I need assistance. There was a pause. Then a shift, the kind of silence that means something's about to happen. Her commanding officer asked for the precinct location, the badge numbers of the officers, if visible, and any immediate witnesses. Maya gave what she could. You're still in cuffs, he asked, she confirmed. Roger that. Stay where you are, we'll handle this. The officer standing nearby shifted uneasily. He wasn't used to hearing that tone from a phone speaker. Something about it disrupted the rhythm of the scene, like this wasn't going to be swept away as easily as others might have been. The call was brief, professional, and cut through the moment like a warning. Maya didn't have to say much more. She had done her part. Now she waited. Unbeknownst to the officers, the man on the other end of that line wasn't just any commanding officer. He was part of a joint task force operating under federal jurisdiction, with direct communication lines to Military Legal Counsel and the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Within 30 minutes of Maya's call, messages began pinging across state and federal systems, first to the Army's JAG office, then to local government oversight committees. A second call was placed, this time not from Maya, but from the upper chain of command, straight to the chief of the local department. The tone had changed. What started as just another stop and frisk, in the eyes of those officers had escalated into a full-blown incident with military involvement. Calls began pouring into the station, not from the public, those were already coming, but from people who carried authority at levels far above any city jurisdiction. The chain of command had been activated, and it wasn't slowing down. Outside, Maya remained in the car. She didn't know the full extent of what her call had triggered, but she could feel it shifting. The second officer, now noticeably quieter, kept glancing toward the street where the crowd was growing. The man filming had started a live stream, updating viewers in real time. More phones were out now, more people talking, questioning, documenting. Maya's words on the call had been few, but they had weight. In that single call, everything began to turn. The fallout started fast. Within hours of Maya's phone call, the police department was under scrutiny from multiple angles. The military liaison contacted the mayor's office directly. The Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division requested body cam footage. Internal Affairs launched an immediate inquiry. The city council scheduled an emergency meeting. By nightfall, both officers involved in the stop were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. News outlets camped outside the station, pressing for statements that weren't coming. The police chief, visibly strained, gave a brief press conference admitting the department had received serious inquiries from federal and military officials and that the situation was being handled with utmost seriousness. But the damage was already done. The image of Meyer in cuffs, head high, uniform creased against a patrol car, had become a national symbol, shared, reposted, dissected. Protests began the next morning, small at first, then larger, organized by veterans groups, civil rights advocates, and local residents. Signs read, "Serve the country, get cuffed," and honor the uniform, all of them. Several former officers, both black and white, spoke out publicly, saying they had never seen such a blatant dismissal of a soldier's authority and identity. Meanwhile, the Army made its own statement. Though carefully worded, it underscored a clear message. Respect for service must be upheld everywhere, and no service member should be subject to unlawful treatment, especially in uniform. A senior Pentagon official called the event deeply troubling. In a televised interview, the officers, now suspended, became the focus of growing public outrage. Their previous records were pulled, scrutinized, and revealed a pattern of complaints that had quietly disappeared over the years. That pattern was now center stage, and investigators weren't looking away.